our first speaker up tonight is Giulia. So Giulia is, I'll just give you a bit of background. So Giulia is a PhD student at the School of Civil Engineering at UCD. Her research background and interests include sustainable urban mobility systems, accessibility and transport equity, as well as travel behaviour and user preferences and needs. Her project is centred on micromobility adoption and use in the urban context, particularly in combination with existing public transport services and networks to provide attractive alternatives to private car. Okay.
Thank you very much for that nice introduction, Rebecca, and good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and very excited to present some of my results from my research project here tonight. In particular, I will be presenting some results from a stated preference survey that I conducted on user characteristics and preferences in the first semester in Dublin. So before I start, just to give you an idea about who I am and some facts. So I was born and raised in Sicily by Swiss parents. After I finished high school, I moved to Switzerland for my undergrad degree in geography and urban planning at the University of Zurich. That might explain my affinity for maps. And then I moved to Denmark, to Copenhagen, where I did a master's in engineering sustainable cities. After that, I moved back to Switzerland, where I gained some work experience in the public sector, working for the Office for Mobility, where this picture was taken, testing different cargo bikes. And then at the end of 2019, I moved to Ireland. And since January 2020, I am a PhD researcher in UCD, working on micromobility. So I'm almost done with my PhD journey, which is exciting. My research project is called Microactive Dublin. And it's a project that is focused on micromobility and in particular its potential to improve and complement existing urban transport systems. And so for the first and the last mile, and that to promote sustainable mode shifts away from private cars. So this is something that is often said about micromobility, that it will allow this sustainable transition. And my project is actually looking at that. Is that really the case? And my case study area is Dublin. And the results that I'm presenting tonight are partially taken from this recent publication from the Journal of Cycling and Micromobility Research, which is a brand new journal. This was actually the first issue that came out in September. And if you want to access the full paper, you can scan the QR code or just type in my name. But yeah, so I will try to make it brief and to cover the most important aspects, but the more detail are included in this. So what we wanted to answer in this research chapter is this research question about mobility patterns, characteristics, and preferences of people in Dublin when they are using public transport. How do they get to their first stop and onto the public transport, and then from their last stop to their destination? And as I said, the case study area is Dublin, or more specifically, the 4 local authorities of Dublin City, Fingal, South Dublin, and Newry Town. And as you all know, it's a very densely populated area, and that's why we picked it for this study. So in order to answer this research question, what we did is to design a stated preference experiment, which is a method that is often used in transport research when you're looking at new technologies or services that are not yet available. And in our case, that was the e-scooter. And we created this experiment with hypothetical scenarios in which the respondents, here you can see an example of one scenario. Respondents were asked to pick one of the options in a hypothetical scenario to get to their first stop. And these attributes that you see, they vary throughout the experiment. So each respondent has to respond to 3 scenarios for the first mile, which is this one. And this is an example of the last mile. So here we have the shared vehicles, but it's built up in a similar way. So each respondent sees 6 of these scenarios and has to pick one option. And then all this data is basically collected. So all the attributes for each single scenario and the choices made by the respondents, and then it's analyzed through a discrete choice model, which I'm not going to go into detail. And then this experiment was included in an online survey that we administered online using a professional survey company in order to get a representative sample of the population of the case study area. In particular, for gender and age, we tried to mimic the census of 2016, which is what we had available. And we were able to collect 450 complete responses. And here you can see the structure of the survey. So these 2 blocks are the experiment, but then we had different other blocks of questions about mobility behavior and patterns, mobility tools available, and socio-demographic questions. So we had a lot of information was collected. And it also took a long time to analyze all the data or to kind of try to make sense of it, and it's still not done. So it's only part of the results actually that was published now and that I'm presenting. And just to give you an idea of the sample, so as I said, 450 total responses were collected. This is the gender and age distribution of the sample in line with the census. Yeah, just to give you the juiciest results. So these are the answers that were given to the scenarios that respondents had to answer. And as I mentioned, each respondent had to answer 3 scenarios for the first mile and 3 for the last mile. And we can see here that walking is definitely preferred by the majority of respondents, both female and male, and even more so for the last mile. And we were surprised by this result. And so we decided to look at in more detail at these people that are actually choosing to walk. So what we found out is that 50% of female respondents and 36% of male respondents have what we call a strong walking preference in this experiment. So in all of the 6 scenarios that they were presented with, they always picked walking, no matter how the attributes changed. And walking is always the alternative with the highest travel time. So travel time was not as relevant as we thought. And in fact, yeah, it seems like there is really a strong walking preference. So we decided to divide the respondents into 2 groups. Those that have this strong walking preference, so that picked walking in all of the scenarios, and those that don't. And I'm just going to go through a few of the characteristics of the sample that we found comparing these 2 groups. So as you can see here, there's a significant difference for gender. So those with a strong walking preference are significantly more likely to be female, and for age, more likely to be older. And I just included these to say that these circles to say that we tested these attributes also in the discrete choice model, and we actually found that female gender had a negative utility on cycling and on e-scooter use. So female respondents are less likely to prefer those modes. And the same goes for age, where we found that respondents that are younger than 35 are more likely to choose those modes in the experiment. And we also looked at the actual mode choice of these respondents. So how do they travel on a day-to-day basis? So we asked them how do they travel and what frequency, and these are the responses for daily or multiple times a week. So we can see again that those with a strong walking preference, or those that picked walking also in the experiment, are also in reality walking more than the others and less likely to use other modes in their daily life. So that's an interesting fact. So there are people that actually walk. Next. Here again, we found that all these factors, in particular, driving car and using public transport, cycling and walking, all had an effect on the discrete choice model, with walking having a negative effect on using shared and private modes, and all the other ones had a positive effect. Next. So I think we don't have time to go through all of them, but it was really evident that also vehicle ownership had a strong effect, and you can see the differences as well. So those with a strong walking preference are less likely to own these vehicles than those that don't have the walking preference. And yeah, we'll go ahead a bit quicker. And we also asked about attitudes towards sharing services, and so interest, and also whether respondents had already tried these services. And here you can see really significant differences between the groups. And also in the discrete choice model, we found that particularly the first two had a big influence on the results and on the mood choice in the experiment. Yeah, so just to conclude, we found that walking is the preferred alternative, both in the first and the last mile. We looked at this strong walking preference in the experiment, and that's actually what was very interesting, and what I think really needs to be investigated further. So what are the reasons for that? We found some results that confirm other findings from other research, that e-scooter users are usually young and male. And we found that all these other characteristics of the mobility behavior and the tools that are available have a great influence on this, how people travel in the first and the last mile. And just to give you a quick idea of what I'm working on now and what I'm doing next is to identify if these people that choose to walk and not to cycle or to use an e-scooter, if there are actual barriers that hinder them from making these choices. So what I want to look at now is, how are these public transport stops and stations? What is the access to these? So is there infrastructure available? Is there parking available? What is the kind of bikeability in the area surrounding the public transport stops and stations? That's what I'm doing at the moment. And this will be the last chapter of my thesis. And yeah, that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And yeah, I would be really interested in hearing your thoughts or comments or questions, because I think
we probably do the questions at the end,
okay.
so everyone will hold the questions and stuff like that, just to make sure we hear her.
Thank you so much.
Okay. So now we have Silvia. Okay. So Silvia is a PhD student in the Social Complexity Lab at Denmark Technical University. She's interested in human mobility, complex cities, and computational social science. Her PhD explores gender gaps in human mobility across countries, cities, and socioeconomic groups. And using causal inference methods, she examines the influence of things like household responsibilities, division of labor, safety perceptions on gender differences in mobility. So, be interesting.
Yes, thank you very much. Very good presentation. Let me know if you can see the correct screen. Can someone say yes?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So yes, thank you very much for introducing me. I'm really excited to be here. I'm doing a PhD in Denmark Technical University. So I have a bit of a background on engineering and data science tools. So while I also study mobility, I give a perspective more from a data science orientation. And today I want to talk a bit about my PhD. And in particular, I'm studying the gender gaps in human mobility. So I'm trying to understand by using data science tools how and why males and females move differently in cities. But what do I mean by that? So if I can pass the slide, yes. So yes, mainly we are all constantly on the move, whether it's biking to work or rushing to pick up the kids from school or simply going to buy some groceries. And there's a thing that clearly our movement is influenced by who we are and our own daily responsibilities. So if you are employed or if you are a parent, of course, your mobility will be different or will be influenced by what you need to do or need to go throughout this particular day. So your social demographics shapes not only where you go, but also how often you go and how often you do it. But it's not only about being employed or being a parent. In fact, previous researchers have already shown that gender plays a very important role on defining human mobility. But most results relied on survey data, and sometimes we don't have access to interviewing a lot of people. So what we wanted to do through my PhD is to try to test the role of gender in human mobility at a large scale. And for that, what we want to do is to quantify how males and females are different, how different they are, but also why are they different and they continue to behave differently in terms of mobility. So to answer the how and to answer the why, we needed some data. And for that, I'm using a quite unique smartphone dataset with data over 1 million users across multiple countries. We have more than 15 countries from different continents. We have data from Japan, US, Brazil, different countries in Europe, and so on. But we also have the different GPS traces of all those individuals. So we know all the places they visited. Also, their self-reported gender. So the gender that the particular individual registered on the app before starting to use the smartphone. And thanks to the smartphone company, we also have access to data about the different applications they use. So if they open an app related to entertainment, or if they open an app related to social media, things like that. And also the physical activity of those users. So if they engage in some running activity, or if they started going for a walk, or things like that. So all of this allows us to study behavior from a very large scale, and we are able to uncover different patterns between users. And for now, what we are doing is focusing between the differences on males and females in mobility. So we can already answer our original question: how different are males from females in terms of mobility? So for that, we looked at the GPS traces, so all the different points that each individual was visiting throughout their day. And here you can see two different networks of visited location. So in orange, you can find an example for a male, and in purple, you find an example for a female. And each dot is the stop they went, and I connected the dots if the stops were consecutive from one to the other. And clearly with those two examples, we see that these two at least are very different one from the other. You can see the range of the orange network of visited locations is way wider than the purple one. But what I want to share with you and to get a clear message is what we found when comparing across all our users. And we found that females indeed have on average, they travel on average within a typical range that is 4 kilometers shorter than males, and they spend 1 hour more at home daily compared to their male counterparts. And this is actually quite a lot. I don't know much about Dublin, but I checked the length of Phoenix Park, and this is actually 4 kilometers. So the fact that males and females have on average 4 kilometers distance is quite abrupt. So we truly need to figure out what is behind these differences between genders. And for that, we propose different hypotheses. But for today, I would like to focus on one particular hypothesis, which is the role of parenthood and how we can use smartphone data to understand why if mothers and fathers move differently. So let's dive into this hypothesis. So it's pretty clear that when people have children, their life completely changes. However, research shows that, and experience shows that women typically experience deeper lifestyle changes than men. And what we want to do here is to try to quantify how parenthood and becoming a parent transforms the mobility of males and of females. To do so, we started by identifying if users were indeed parents or if they become parents during our observation period. And we started by analyzing the apps that these users were using in their phone. And if we were able to find an app related to parenthood or lactancy or early parenthood, so apps to help out the kid get distracted or things like that, then we were able to identify this user as a parent. And we use the moment that this user starts using the app as our estimated birth. Then, to study the causal effects of becoming a parent, we compare each individual mobility level, the levels that they have in terms of mobility after birth, with a control and synthetic reference group before pregnancy even. And in this synthetic group, we controlled for the country, age, time of the year, the body mass index, and all the elements so that we could always compare individuals that are very similar one another, and the only thing that they deviated from one to the other was that one has become a parent recently. So processing all this data allowed us to study how mobility changes for each individual after becoming parents. And to study mobility, we decided to study the level of physical activity. And for that, we counted the number of steps that those users were taking. We decided to go for the count of steps because the strong association between physical activity and physical and mental health. So if we are to find a persistent gender gap in the count of steps, we will not only be highlighting an inequality among movement, but also this inequality will reach health and well-being. So now we can already check the results and see what we found. And we actually here I'm showing in the x-axis the different months relative to our month 0, our estimated birth, and the relative difference of our synthetic group and all our users before pregnancy. So we see how the count of steps changes throughout the different months. And we can clearly see that in the case of females, the purple line, there is quite a big drop that starts a bit with pregnancy and reaches up to a 15.1%. But instead, if we look at males, we see that the orange curve is almost unaltered. And in fact, that there are changes for males are overall non-significant. However, we need to consider that, of course, pregnancy, postpartum, these all can have an effect on women's body and their capability to move around. So we needed to question, do these differences that we're seeing have long-lasting effects? In other words, do females recover their pre-pregnancy levels after perhaps the first year? So we tested for that. And here you can see that we expanded to further months, and we see that indeed females do not recover at all their mobility levels after having a child. And then on average, the drop becomes to up to 17.5%, while males remain unaltered. These are quite alarming results because, as we mentioned, it means that there is indeed an inequality when it comes to parenthood and how it affects in the mobility and health of our individuals. But I don't want to finish in a negative note. I try to bring some positive sense out of it. So for that, I would like to show you what happens when we stratify by the different countries that we have available, when we try to understand if this behavior is maintained across all the countries that we were analyzing. And we actually find deep differences between countries. While in some cases, like France and Germany, we've reached a gender difference, so the gap in terms of steps between males and females to up to 20 points. There's countries that, for example, Sweden, this gender gap is reversed. So which means that in the particular case of Sweden, females actually work more after having a child than they used to work before. But of course, we need to understand why is this happening. And here we need further investigations, and we still didn't reach this point of our analysis, but we have already looked at the correlation between our gender gap and the parental policies in different countries, as well as the gender norms using survey data. And we actually found strong correlations between the two variables, indicating that indeed investing in parental policies that support females going back to work or having men engage more in parental activities can be a sign that these will help us reduce our gender gap in count of steps. But I have talked a lot about the parenthood, differences in parenthood, but I think that particular for this forum, you might be very much interested in the role of space and how the physical environment can shape the mobility in the individuals. And this is very recent results, but I wanted to show you the effects that we see when people decide to cycle. And for that, we're using another data set. I'm using data obtained from Strava, which is an app that where users recorded their trips across the city. And here I focus only on trips recorded with bikes or e-bikes. And here you can see it's the map of Copenhagen, the city I live in. And you can clearly see that males and females do not share the same spaces. Here, the streets that are highlighted in orange are the streets that are more likely to be used by cycling by males, and the ones in purple are the ones that are more likely to be used by females. I'm only plotting significant differences, so it shows that in all these streets, there's a clear gender that dominates the cycling activity of that street. And we can see that females seem to be more centered in the city center of Copenhagen, but we still need to uncover what are all these elements that are influencing males and females to bike in different places. And for that, I would love to hear your inputs, because I believe that the infrastructure in cities and perhaps things that you have already seen while biking around in Dublin could help us investigate and find the correct questions to test what is behind this gender gap in the biking activity in the particular city of Copenhagen. But yes, that's all for me. So thank you very much. I could hear some of my collaborators and just looking forward to the questions.
Thank you very much, Silvia. That was great. Okay, so we'll go straight to Brendan, and then we'll go for questions at the end then. So we've got Brendan up next. So Brendan is the Education and Public Engagement Manager at the Insight SFI Research Centre for Data Analytics at the Data Science Institute of NUI Galway. In his current role, he works extensively with a wide range of communities and schools to engage and empower them in exploiting the potential of digital technologies for learning, cultural heritage, social and economic purposes. Okay, so Brendan, if you're ready.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. And yeah, so I'm an Education Public Engagement Manager at Insight Centre for Data Analytics, which is approximately 400 researchers, one of the biggest in Europe involved in data science, data analytics, and we're spread right across the country, primarily based at the universities of UCD, DCU in Dublin, UCC in Cork, Maynooth, and my own university here in Galway. So we have a really exciting citizen science project known as Crowd for Access, and it's all about mapping the accessibility of footpaths in our urban cities. And it came about because we realized that every city has been mapped 1,000 times over, photographed 1,000 times over, but it has primarily been done from the car, or to a lesser degree from the cyclist, from cycling, but not from the footpaths. And when we looked at the footpaths, we saw there was a huge amount of obstacles facing people with different mobility needs, for and we all have mobility issues at some time of our life in terms of accessibility, from the very young children to the parent with the buggy, with somebody in a wheelchair. All of us go through these accessibility issues on the footpaths, but none of them up until now comprehensively have been photographed and mapped. So Connor, if you show the film, I will follow through with more detail if you show the film there. And just go back to the beginning.
Whole world created a game. But it's not the same for all of us. A lot of the times it can still be hard to get to where you need to go. And it's not just wheelchair users. Getting around is still difficult for people who are visually impaired, for people who use crutches, or even people with a buggy. It's not just hard, sometimes it's even impossible.
On the other side, the road is a large curve. I would be able to access that, but I can't get down because of this raised curve.
Science, technology, and engineering has transformed the lives of disabled people, helping us live full, independent lives. The Grant for Access project at the Insight Centre is an exciting example of what happens when you pair data science with citizen scientists to tackle a problem that's faced by wider society. In this case, it's the inaccessibility of the footpaths of our towns and cities.
In order to solve a problem, you first have to understand the problem, and that means gathering data. Data scientists use software, machine learning, and artificial intelligence to solve real-world problems that help us make better decisions to have a positive impact on people's lives.
We are working together, researchers and citizens, in try to understand the problem of footpath accessibility, and in try to collect information to create maps of the accessibility of footpaths around Ireland.
We ask people to get involved in this project as citizen scientists by going out and taking photographs of footpaths in their local area. In doing this, they find things that might influence access, like tactile pavements, flushed curbs, footpath width, crossings, and things like that.
Yeah. Oh no, we're not having that one.
People can also get involved by adding data to maps from the photographs they've taken using an open access plan.
The current maps, they have a lot of information for cars, where the main roads are, and how many kilometers per hour you can go to a road, but there's not much information about the footpaths or the street crossing.
The data being collected by Grant for Access citizen scientists is enriching maps with valuable data on accessibility for pedestrians. But adding information to online maps manually is a time-consuming process, and that's where machine learning comes in, specifically image analysis. Image analysis is a huge field of research in data science that helps us to process and interpret information. If we can teach computers to see images in the same way that humans do, this is what's known as machine.
In the Grant for Access project, we are teaching a computer or a machine learning algorithm to learn the features of the urban elements like tactile paving, which will speed up the process of annotations on the map. If I look at this picture, I can see the sky, the trees, the buildings, the footpath, the traffic lights. And if I closely look at this one small section, there are bumps. So these are the tactile paving. And as a human, I can easily identify such different elements in the image, but for the machine, it's very difficult. So what do? We need images that are containing tactile paving for teaching a machine learning model how to recognize it. Fortunately, citizen scientists in the Grant for Access project have gathered tons and thousands of images. We manually go through all these images and filter out the images containing only the tactile pavement and annotate them. And once we have all these annotations, we feed the images to the machine learning model so that it can learn the features of the tactile pavement. And once it sees any new image containing the tactile pavement, it will be able to identify or recognize the tactile pavement automatically. But there are challenges. Tactile paving can look different depending on the weather condition, time of the day, and the position of the sun in the sky. And this is where the citizen scientists played very important role in capturing different thing which is different than today. This data is very valuable to us.
The aim of this research is that in the future, annotation of footpath accessibility can be done automatically, not just here in Ireland, but anywhere.
We believe the data we are gathering to Credit for Access project will help us improve the accessibility of all of our neighborhoods, whether that be providing better information to urban town planners or advocates for accessibility, or by providing better maps directly to those with accessibility challenges.
What I'd like to see is cities and towns where everywhere is accessible to everyone. But in the meantime, maps that can show you where it's accessible and where it's inaccessible are very valuable tools. And that's why I think the work being done by researchers and citizen scientists at Crowd for Access is so important.
Yeah, so thank you for that. So I think it's very self-explanatory that this is a partnership between professional researchers involved in image analysis and ordinary people with different accessibility issues mapping our footprints. We have problems with width. We have problems with different types of curb height. We have issues about different crossings. So for instance, you might have a crossing for road that has audio, but it doesn't have other features in terms of accessibility for people outside visual impairment. So what we want to do is make our cities accessible for all. What's happened right through the 20th century, our cities were built around cars, cyclists were ignored, pedestrians were ignored. So it's about reimagining our cities, but giving the information built up by ordinary people involved in citizen science to the policymakers to make a change. We can all say, oh, there's issues of high curbs in such a location and missing tactile pavement in another location, bollards here, narrowness there. But we collect all of that data through the citizen science ordinary people. So what we do is we have a series of workshops. The first one is to show people how to use a camera in terms of mapping it. So we use ordinary free apps like Mapillary that creates a constant stream of photographs. The second set of workshops is where we analyze that photographs and we put in the trees along the streets, we put in the bollards, we put in the high-speed pavements or the curbs, we put in the tactile pavement. So we build up a picture that doesn't exist in Ireland and most of the world at the moment. As I say, our cities are photographed from the car or to a lesser degree from the cyclists, but hardly ever from the pedestrians. And we need to give this information to our policy makers to make those changes that society actually needs. To complement that, we also have at Insight, we're putting together a series of weather stations, low cost weather stations based on analyzing the gases like nitrous oxide, like CO, carbon monoxide, and also the particulates. So again, it's part of this process of change, creating cities, because we live now in an urbanized planet that is accessible to all. And at the moment, we're doing a lot of mapping across Ireland, but particularly in places like Galway, and we involve all different types of groups. As you can see from the photographs there, or the film there, we have schools, we have student groups, we have disability groups, and we have concerned individuals. So thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Brendan. And we have our final speaker, Sen. So Sen is a PhD student at the School of Electronic Engineering at DCU and the Insight S5 Research Centre for Data Analytics. He's working in the areas of intelligent transportation and micromobility.
Thanks for the introduction. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sen Yan, a PhD student from WCT University. I'm also working with Insight with Brendan. And thanks very much to the introduction given by Silvia, because my research mainly focuses on data-driven methods used in shared mobility systems, like the bike sharing systems or e-scooter systems. My presentation today will So the topic of my presentation, is Breathing Green, which is mainly focusing on improving the user experience for vulnerable road users regarding the health concerns when they are traveling on the road based on the large scale air quality data in Dublin. I've already attached my email here, so please feel free to contact me if you want to negotiate or just network. And if you're interested in our work, that'll be fine. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. Can we move on? Yeah, I've already divided my presentation into 5 sections today. The introduction, a very brief introduction to air quality and air pollutants, our research problem and the system architecture, the methods used and the experiments made in our research and the results and some relevant discussions. Finally, the conclusion and our plan for the future work. Now move on to thank you. So thinking about air pollutants, I think a lot of well-known air pollutants will come into our mind, for example, CO, NO2, and PM2.5. But today we mainly talk about NOx and PM2.5. NOx stands for a group of harmful gases in the air generated from a lot of sources, such as mainly from the vehicle engines or industry processes. Well, PM2.5 stands for the fine particular matter in the air, also from different sources like cars, factories, even the natural dust. Breathing in NOx and PM2.5 can harm our lungs, our hearts, causing some cancers and even some other health issues. So they are both the major contributors to air pollution. Economically, air quality relevant issues cost around 2.3 billion euro loss in Ireland every year on average in recent years. And the global number goes to 2.9 trillion euros. And on the other hand, there are around 3,300 people dying earlier in Ireland every year because of the direct or indirect effects by air pollution. And the global number goes to 7 million. So this really encourages us to focus on the health concerns for vulnerable road users like the pedestrians or some micromobility system users. Please move on. Yeah, thank you. So our work aims to minimize the health damage inflicted on vulnerable road users due to exposure to air pollution. Specifically, it is the health concern, our health concern for the vulnerable users and the amounts for different air pollutants, and also the economic loss that inspired us to create a green route recommendation system to minimize exposure to a specific pollutant index when traveling with any origin and destination pair in Dublin. Yeah, thank you. Our system consists of 4 sections apart from the user side. A mobile application is designed to interact with the user and the backend server for data transmission. The user is allowed to assign any origin and destination pairs with a specific air pollutant index. After the server receives the information from the front end, it will determine a green route based on the optimization algorithm and the data stored in our database. Afterwards, the recommended routes will be sent back to the user end and visualized on the mobile app. Thank you. So here is an example. The first picture shows how the user can customize their own pollutant index. So for now, we mainly focus on NO, NO2, O3, CO, and PM2.5. And users are also allowed to choose their own travel mode between pedestrian or cyclist. But actually, the cyclist also includes some other some public transportation methods. And the second picture in the middle represents how the user inputs their origin and destination. For example, this guy is trying to walk from the Spire to Dublin Castle. And the third one on the right side represents the results. So here, the orange route represents the shortest path based on the origin and destination, but it's very obvious that it's not as clean as the green route. So we call that path green path, and apparently it's reduced the effect of pollution by around 60%. Can we? Yeah, thank you. So our system used, we chose the ITRUS algorithm to find the best route for our work. But before the experiments, we cleaned and filled the dataset provided by Google with 3 steps. The first one is the linear interpolation. This is mainly used for some incorrect values, such as the negative value in our dataset for any air pollutant amount. And the second one is data integration. We combined our air quality data set with the shared bike station data set from WBike to try our system on some shared mobilities. And thirdly, we use the ball tree algorithm to fill the data, to fill the missing data in our data set based on the geographical relevance. And afterwards, we conducted mainly 3 sets of experiments. Firstly, we set all the air pollutants with the same weights to generate the overall air pollutant index. Then we run 1,000 rounds of our experiments to test our system's performance based on random OD pairs. Secondly, we chose the OD pairs only from the shared bike stations to estimate our system performance regarding the situation when a user is using a shared mobility, for example, the shared bike, maybe Dublin bike. And thirdly, the third experiment is based on only 1 trip, but we used different air pollutant index just to test the comprehensiveness of our system. And the results, on the left side, we can, it's easy for us to obtain that for the first group, the pollutant effect is decreased by around 18% on average and 65% on maximum. And for the shared devices, the air pollution effect is reduced by around 15% on average and 31% on maximum. But apart from the rate of air pollutant decrease, we also compared it with the rate of trip distance. So after the comparison, we found our system performs very acceptably because it achieves a considerable balance between these two attributes of our trip. So that means with a tiny increase in the trip distance, our system can help with a very big improvement in the health of our users. And the third experiment shows different rules recommended for different setups with the same OD pairs, which is visualized in this picture on our right side. And it can be seen that with different pollutant indexes, the recommended routes are significantly different to each other. And in the picture below, it's visualized the NO2 distribution around that region. So it is easier for us to estimate, to evaluate our system performance regarding the NO2 lowest path in the picture above. Thank you. And here we conclude the presentation of mine. So basically, we did data analysis and defined and solved an optimization problems based on a real-world data set collected from Dublin. And we designed a green route recommendation system for vulnerable road users, which achieves considerable results for them. And to improve our system, we will focus on better pollutant evaluation metrics, more novel least polluting algorithms, and do some comparisons of pollution savings against estimated variations. For example, the day-to-day differences. That's my presentation today. Thank you very much.